The road was supposed to be an easy one. Just a few hours of driving, some music, quiet talks, and a short break from life. He had suggested it without much thought, the kind of idea that comes out when everything feels heavy and you just want air. She agreed almost too quickly, like she needed the escape just as much. They had known each other for years, long enough to understand silence without explaining it. Being together felt normal, safe. The sky was cloudy when they left, but not threatening. The kind of gray that looks calm, almost gentle. He checked the weather once before starting the car and shrugged it off. It said light rain, nothing serious. They laughed about how weather apps were always wrong anyway. She teased him for driving too carefully, and he teased her for packing too many snacks. The car moved forward, and with it, their thoughts slowly loosened. As the city faded behind them, the road narrowed. Trees lined both sides, tall and quiet. The air felt cooler. She rolled down the window just a little, letting the smell of wetter slip inside. It reminded her of childhood days, when rain meant running outside instead of hiding from it. He noticed her smile and asked what she was thinking about. She said it was nothing, but her voice sounded lighter than it had in weeks. They talked about small things at first. Old jokes, people they once knew, silly memories that made no sense to anyone else. Those were always their favorites. There was comfort in remembering who they used to be. Every laugh felt like a small win. The radio played softly, not loud enough to interrupt their words. Everything felt balanced, like the world had finally slowed down for them. The first drops of rain hit the windshield quietly. He turned on the wipers without much thought. She leaned back in her seat, watching the sky through the glass. The clouds had thickened, turning darker, moving faster than before. The road ahead looked empty. No cars, no houses, just trees and bends that disappeared too quickly. The rain grew heavier within minutes. The sound on the roof changed, louder, sharper. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. She noticed and asked if he was okay. He nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the road. The wipers struggled now, moving faster, clearing less. The air inside the car felt different, tense in a way neither of them wanted to name. They lost phone signal shortly after. One bar, then none. He mentioned it casually, trying not to worry her. She checked her phone anyway, refreshing the screen again and again, like that might help. It didn't. She placed it back in her bag slowly, as if accepting something she didn't want to admit yet. Thunder rolled in the distance. At first it sounded far away, like something happening in another world, but it didn't stay distant for long. The sky cracked open with sound, deep and loud, making the car feel small. She flinched and laughed it off, but her hand stayed clenched in her lap. The rain became a wall. He slowed down. The road was harder to see now, water pooling along the sides. Leaves and small branches were scattered across the asphalt. He wondered if they should turn back, but the road behind them looked just as bad when he checked the mirror. It felt like the storm had surrounded them, without warning. She tried to distract him, pointing out shapes in the clouds, even though they could barely see the sky anymore. Her voice stayed steady, but her eyes gave her away. They were watching everything at once, the road, the trees, the water, as if danger might jump out at any moment. Then the car shuddered. It wasn't loud at first, just a sudden shake, like hitting something soft but heavy. He eased off the gas immediately. The steering wheel felt strange, unresponsive. Another shake followed, stronger this time. He pulled over as much as he could, heart pounding, rain pouring down so hard it felt like it might break the glass. The engine coughed once, twice, then went silent. He tried again. Nothing. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The rain filled the space between them. Thunder crashed again, closer now. He rested his head back against the seat and let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. She was the first to say something. "It's okay," she said softly, even though it didn't feel okay at all. "We'll figure it out." He tried the key once more, slower this time, like patience might help. The engine didn't respond. He checked the dashboard, then the hood release, though he already knew getting out in this storm would do nothing. Water was beginning to gather around the tires. Not deep yet, but enough to notice. The road looked lower here, like it dipped slightly. He felt a knot form in his stomach. She wrapped her arms around herself. The car felt colder now, or maybe that was just fear setting in. She asked where they were exactly. He told her he wasn't sure. Somewhere between where they started and where they were going. The answer didn't help either of them. They sat there, listening to the storm rage around them. Every sound felt louder than it should have. The wind shook the car. Trees bent and creaked, their branches swaying wildly. It felt like the world outside was angry, like they had wandered into something they weren't meant to face. He finally admitted what he was thinking, that he was worried, that this road wasn't safe, that he should have checked the weather again. She didn't blame him. She never did. Instead, she told him this wasn't his fault, that storms didn't ask permission before arriving. She tried to joke again, saying this would be a story they'd laugh about later. He smiled weakly, but the idea of later felt far away. He looked at her and noticed how pale she seemed in the dim light. Her lips were pressed together tightly. Her breathing was shallow, controlled. He asked if she was feeling okay. She hesitated, just for a second. Then she nodded and said she was fine. He knew her well enough to hear the lie, but he didn't push. Sometimes people needed space, even in moments like this. The rain didn't slow. If anything, it came down harder. Water crept closer to the car doors. He checked outside again, heart sinking. The road was slowly turning into a shallow stream. They talked about calling for help, but without signal, it was useless. He considered walking to find higher ground or another vehicle. But one look outside made it clear how dangerous that would be. The wind could knock someone over. The rain made it hard to see more than a few steps ahead. So they stayed. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time felt strange, stretched thin. She rested her head against the window, eyes half closed. He watched her quietly, worried in a way he hadn't felt before. This wasn't just about being stuck. Something else was wrong. He could feel it. He reached over and gently touched her arm. She looked at him, then really looked at him, and for a moment all the noise outside faded. There was fear in her eyes, but also trust. Deep, unshaken trust. The storm continued to roar, trapping them in its grip, unaware that this was only the beginning of something that would change both of them forever. The storm did not calm down. If anything, it grew louder, like it had decided to stay. Rain slammed against the car without pause. The wind pushed from every direction, rocking the vehicle just enough to remind them how exposed they were. The world outside had turned into moving shadows and rushing water. Inside, the air felt heavy, filled with thoughts neither of them wanted to say out loud. He checked the time on the dashboard, though it didn't really matter anymore. Minutes felt like hours. He tried the phone again, holding it up near the window, then near the roof, as if height might help. Still nothing. No signal. No way to call anyone. He placed the phone down carefully, trying not to show how much that worried him. She sat quietly beside him, too quietly. Her arms were crossed tight around her body, not just to stay warm, but like she was holding herself together. Her breathing was slow, but uneven. He noticed the way her shoulders lifted and fell, slightly off rhythm. He asked again if she was okay, keeping his voice calm. She said yes. Again, but this time her voice cracked at the end, just a little. Thunder struck, so close it made her jump. She grabbed the seat with one hand. He reached over without thinking and covered her hand with his. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled around his, gripping tighter than he expected. Her hand was cold. "I hate storms," she said suddenly. It wasn't something she had ever mentioned before. Not in all the years they had known each other. He nodded. "I didn't know that." "I don't talk about it," she replied. "I try not to think about it." Another loud crack echoed through the trees. Water splashed against the sides of the car. He looked out again. The road was barely visible now. The water level had risen more. Not fast, but enough to notice. He told her they might have to move if it got worse. Not now, but later. He didn't want to scare her, but he didn't want to lie either. She listened carefully, nodding, eyes focused on his face like she was memorizing it. They sat in silence for a bit. Not the comfortable silence they usually shared, but something heavier, the kind filled with unspoken fear. Then she spoke again, softer this time. "Can I tell you something?" He turned toward her fully. "Of course." She hesitated. Her eyes dropped to their hands. She took a breath, then another. I haven't been feeling right for a while, she said. I didn't want to worry you. His chest tightened. What do you mean? She shrugged, but the movement looked weak. I get tired easily, dizzy sometimes. I thought it was stress, or lack of sleep. You know how life gets. He nodded, but his mind was racing. He asked why she didn't tell anyone. She gave a small, sad smile. Because I didn't want to be the problem. Everyone already has enough. He shook his head gently. You're not a problem. She looked at him then, eyes shining with emotion. I know you believe that, she said. That's why I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want that look in your eyes. What look? The worried one. The car shook again as the wind pushed hard against it. She leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. He noticed her breathing getting faster now, shallow and uneven. He asked if she was cold. She nodded, though the car heater was still running weakly. He gave her his jacket, without thinking. She protested at first, but he insisted. When she put it on, she relaxed just a little. The rain showed no sign of stopping. Water now reached the bottom of the doors. He felt a growing sense of urgency, but forced himself to stay calm. Panic would help no one. She started talking more, almost like she was afraid to stop. She spoke about things she had never said before. How she sometimes felt invisible. How she always tried to be strong so others wouldn't worry. How tired she was of pretending everything was fine. He listened, really listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix anything. He just stayed there with her, hands still holding hers. At some point, her voice grew weaker. She paused often, catching her breath. Her head leaned against the seat, eyes half closed. He asked if she was sleepy. She said no, but it sounded like a lie. Thunder rolled again, long and deep. The storm felt endless now, like the world had shrunk down to just this car, this moment. He suggested they eat something, hoping it might help her energy. She shook her head. I don't feel like it. That scared him more than he wanted to admit. He tried to keep her talking, asked about memories, about silly moments from the past. She smiled faintly at some of them, laughed softly once or twice. But it didn't last. Her energy faded quickly. I didn't think this would happen today, she said quietly. What do you mean? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared out the window at the rain, eyes distant. I thought I had more time to figure things out. His heart skipped. Time for what? She turned to him, eyes filled with fear now. Real fear she could no longer hide. Time to get help, she whispered. Time to be honest. He squeezed her hand gently. You still have time, he said, even though the words felt fragile. Another flash of lightning lit up the car. In that brief moment, he saw how pale she looked, how tired, how scared. The water outside reached higher now. It brushed against the door handles. The car felt smaller, more trapped. He knew they couldn't stay much longer. But leaving the car in this storm felt dangerous too. He told her they might need to find shelter if the water kept rising. She nodded slowly, like she understood, but her eyes showed uncertainty. I don't know if I can walk far, she admitted. That admission hit him hard. He promised her they would figure out together, that he wouldn't leave her, that no matter what, she wasn't alone. She looked at him like she needed those words more than anything. The storm continued its relentless roar. The world outside remained wild and unforgiving. Inside the car, something shifted. Fear was still there, but now it was mixed with honesty, with truths finally spoken. As the rain poured on and the water crept closer, both of them knew this was no longer just a bad situation. It was a test of strength, of trust, and how far someone would go to stay beside the person who mattered most. The water reached the bottom edge of the doors not long after. It moved slowly, almost politely, like it was giving him time to understand what was happening. But he knew better. Water never stayed polite for long. He leaned forward and shut off the engine completely, even though it had already failed. The silence that followed felt wrong. Without the saw from the car, the storm sounded louder, closer, more aggressive. Rain hit the roof hard enough to make it ring. Wind pushed against the sides like hands trying to force their way in. She noticed the change immediately. Why did you turn it off? She asked. It's not doing anything anyway, he said gently, and we might need to save what little power we have. She nodded, but her eyes stayed on the rising water. Is it bad? He didn't answer right away. He didn't want to lie, but he didn't want to scare her either. It's getting there, he said finally. We may have to move soon. She swallowed. Her throat looked tight, like she was holding back more than words. Move where? He looked out through the rain again, scanning for anything higher. The road dipped where they were stuck, but he could see a slight rise not too far ahead. Beyond that, through the blur of rain, he thought he saw a small structure, maybe an old storage shed or a roadside shelter. It wasn't clear, but it was something. There, he said, pointing. We can try to get there. She followed his finger, squinting. That's far. Not too far, he replied, though he wasn't sure. We'll go slow. Another loud thunderclap made her flinch. She wrapped the jacket tighter around herself. I'm scared, she admitted. I know, he said. I am too. He unlocked the doors but told her to wait. He wanted to be sure. The water was now touching the bottom of the seat frames. Not rushing, but steady. He knew that once it reached higher, the doors would be harder to open. He stepped out first. The cold shocked him instantly. Rain soaked him in seconds. The water was colder than he expected, pushing against his legs with more force than it looked like it had. He braced himself, standing firm, testing the ground beneath his feet. It was slippery but solid. He turned back to her and held out his hand. Okay, come on. She hesitated, fear clear on her face. Then she took his hand. He helped her out slowly, careful with every movement. The water reached just below her knees, and she gasped at the cold. Her grip on his hand tightened. They moved step by step. The rain blurred everything. Wind made it hard to hear anything but the storm. Each step felt heavier than the last. She leaned on him more than she had before, her weight shifting unevenly. He could feel how weak she was becoming. Tell me if you need to stop, he said. She nodded but didn't speak. They reached the rise in the road and climbed slowly. His legs burned from fighting the water and holding her steady. His heart raced, not just from effort, but from fear of falling, of losing balance, of losing her. The structure ahead came into clearer view. It was small and old, barely standing, but it looked dry inside. A simple roof, 3 walls, open on one side. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. When they finally reached it, he guided her inside carefully. The relief hit him hard once they were out of the water. Rain still blew in from the open side, but at least it wasn't all around them anymore. She sank down onto the ground immediately, exhausted. Her breathing was fast and uneven. He knelt beside her, soaked and shaking, but focused only on her. Hey, he said softly. Look at me. Her eyes fluttered open. She smiled weakly. We made it. Yes, he said. We did. He took off his wet shoes and socks and placed them aside, then did the same for her, rubbing her feet gently to warm them. Her skin felt cold to the touch. Too cold. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, using his own body to block the wind as best he could. She rested her head against his chest. He could feel her heartbeat, fast but faint. That scared him more than anything else. I'm sorry, she whispered. For what? He asked. For not telling you sooner, she said. For pretending I was fine. He shook his head. None of that matters right now. But it does to me, she said. I didn't want you to see me like this. Weak. You're not weak, he said firmly. You're here. You're fighting. She closed her eyes. I'm tired. He felt her body relax against his. Too much. Hey, he said quickly. Stay awake. Talk to me. She opened her eyes again, struggling. What do you want to talk about? Anything, he said. Tell me about that place you always wanted to visit, the one near the water. She smiled faintly. I always thought I'd go there when life slowed down. Life can slow down later, he said. Right now, I need you to stay with me. Her breathing grew uneven again. She shivered despite his warmth. He held her tighter, rubbing her arms, talking constantly, even when he wasn't sure what he was saying. Stories, memories, jokes that didn't really land. Anything to keep her mind engaged. Time passed strangely. He couldn't tell how long they had been there. The storm didn't ease. If anything, it sounded endless. No signs of people. No voices. No lights. Her grip on his shirt loosened. He felt it immediately. Panic surged through him. "Hey," he said louder now. "Don't drift. Stay here with me." She stirred slightly. Her eyes opened just enough to meet his. Fear filled him. Real, deep fear. "I don't want to sleep," she whispered. "I'm afraid I won't wake up." "You will," he said, even though his throat burned with the effort of sounding confident. "I'm right here." She looked at him for a long moment, studying his face like she needed to remember it. Rain blew in around them, cold and relentless. Thunder rolled again, shaking the ground. Her hand found his chest. Fingers trembling, she pressed her palm there, feeling his heartbeat. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything," he replied instantly. "Don't let me go," she whispered. Then, barely louder than the rain, she said the words that cut straight through him. "Stay with me." He tightened his arms around her, holding on as if letting go would mean losing her forever. "I'm here," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." Outside, the storm continued without mercy. Inside that fragile shelter, hope felt thin, fragile, but still alive. And as he held her through the cold and fear, he knew this moment, these words, would stay with him forever, no matter how the night ended. He kept holding her after she whispered those words. "Stay with me." They echoed in his mind louder than the thunder outside. The storm could scream all it wanted, but those 3 words were stronger. They carried fear, trust, and something deeper that didn't need a name. "I'm here," he repeated, pressing his cheek lightly against her wet hair. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." Her breathing was still uneven, not fast like before, but not steady either. He could feel every shaky breath against his chest. The cold air pushed into the shelter from the open side, bringing rain with it. He shifted his body slightly, turning his back toward the wind so it would hit him first instead of her. His arms were tired, his legs sore from the walk to the water, but he refused to loosen his grip. If strength was the only thing he could give her right now, then he would give all of it. "Talk to me," he said gently. "Tell me something. Anything." She swallowed. "I don't know what to say." "Tell me about the first day we met," he said quickly, trying to keep her mind moving. "You always say I look confused." A small smile touched her lips. It was faint, but it was there. "You did," she whispered. "You walked into the wrong room and acted like you meant to be there." He laughed softly, relieved to hear even that small response. "I still say I was exploring." "You were lost," she replied weakly. "Maybe," he admitted. "But I found you, so it worked out." Her eyes closed for a second too long. He felt her body relax again, too much. He gently shook her shoulder. "Hey, stay with me. Open your eyes." She forced them open, blinking slowly. "I'm trying." "I know," he said, his voice breaking just slightly. "And you're doing great. Just keep trying." The rain hit the roof hard enough to make the thin metal tremble. Wind howled through the trees around them. Somewhere in the distance, something heavy fell. Maybe a branch, maybe worse. The world outside felt wild and unpredictable, but inside that small space, it was just the 2 of them fighting quietly. He started rubbing her arms again, trying to warm her up. Her hands were still cold. He took them between his and breathed warm air onto her fingers. "Remember that road trip we planned last year?" he asked. "The one we never took?" She said softly. "Yeah, we're still taking it. This doesn't count. This is just the dramatic preview." She gave the smallest laugh, barely a sound. "You always try to make things lighter." "Because heavy things don't need more weight," he replied. She looked at him carefully, like she was studying something important. "You're scared." He didn't deny it this time. "Yes," he said honestly. "I am." Her hand moved slightly, gripping his shirt again. "Don't be." "I'll try," he said, "but you have to help me. You staying awake helps." She nodded faintly. Time stretched on. The storm didn't seem to move away. It felt like they were stuck in the center of it. His mind raced with thoughts. What if no one came? What if the road was blocked? What if they were too far from any main highway? He pushed those thoughts aside. Fear would only make his voice shake, and she needed steady. "Listen to me," he said softly. "When this is over, we're going to laugh about how stubborn we were, about how we thought we could outdrive a storm." She looked at him, eyes heavy but focused. "You really believe that?" "I have to," he said. Her breathing slowed slightly, but this time it felt more stable. He counted each breath quietly in his head, just to be sure. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Every steady breath felt like a small victory. Then, through the sound of rain and wind, he thought he heard something else. He froze, listening carefully. At first, he thought it was his imagination. The storm was loud. It played tricks on the ears. But then, he heard it again, faint, distant, a low hum, an engine. His heart jumped. He leaned forward slightly, straining to hear. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "Hear what?" she murmured. I think there's a vehicle." He shifted carefully, standing halfway and looking out past the curtain of rain. Visibility was terrible, just sheets of gray and moving shadows. But the sound came again, closer this time. He felt a rush of hope, so strong it almost hurt. "Stay here," he told her gently. "I'm just going to step closer to the edge." She tightened her grip instantly. "Don't leave." "I'm not leaving," he assured her. "Just a few steps. You can still see me." He carefully eased her back against the wall, making sure she was stable. Then he stepped toward the open side of the shelter. Rain hit him immediately, cold and sharp. He squinted into the storm, and then he saw it, faint flashing lights through the rain. Not lightning. Different, rhythmic, red and white, cutting through the gray. His chest filled with relief, so powerful it made his knees weak. He turned back to her. "There's someone out there," he said, voice shaking now for a different reason. "I see lights." Her eyes opened wider than they had in a while. "Really?" "Yes. I'm going to wave them down." He stepped fully into the rain, raising both arms and shouting as loud as he could. The wind tried to steal his voice, but he kept yelling. The lights moved slowly, carefully, like the driver was navigating through flood. He waved his jacket in the air, jumping slightly to make himself visible. For a second, he feared they wouldn't see him, that they would pass by without noticing the small shelter on the side. But then the lights slowed. They turned slightly in his direction. Hope surged again. He ran back inside quickly. "They're stopping," he told her. "They saw us." Her eyes filled with tears, mixing with rain on her cheeks. "I told you," she whispered weakly. "We'd figure it out." He knelt beside her again, brushing wet hair from her face. "You did," he said. "You stayed." The sound of doors opening somewhere outside reached them through the storm. Voices followed, distant but real, strong and clear. He shouted back, calling for help, giving their location as best he could. Footsteps splashed closer. For the first time since the car stopped, he felt the tight grip of fear loosen around his chest. They weren't alone anymore. He looked down at her, still holding her hand. "See," he said softly, "you're not going anywhere." Her lips moved slowly, forming the faintest smile. "You stayed." "Always," he replied. The storm still raged around them, but it no longer felt endless. Through the wind and rain came the sound of people reaching them, voices full of urgency and care. And as he held her hand tightly, he knew that sometimes survival wasn't about strength alone. Sometimes it was about refusing to let go when someone whispers for you to stay. The voices grew louder as the rescuers reached the small shelter. Flashlights cut through the rain, bright beams moving across the ground, the walls, and finally landing on them. For a moment, he had to blink because the light felt too strong after sitting in the dark for so long. Two people rushed toward them, wearing heavy rain jackets and boots. Their faces were serious but calm. One of them knelt beside her immediately, speaking in a steady voice, asking simple questions. She tried to answer, but her words were soft and slow. "I've got her," the rescuer said gently. He didn't let go of her hand right away. His fingers were locked around hers, almost stiff from cold and tension. One of the rescuers placed a firm but kind hand on his shoulder. "We'll take care of her," he said. That was the first moment he allowed himself to breathe properly. They wrapped a thick blanket around her and helped her sit up. She looked smaller somehow, fragile in a way he had never seen before, but her eyes were still open, still focused, still fighting. They guided both of them carefully through the rain toward a rescue vehicle parked on higher ground. The flashing lights reflected off the water, turning everything into a blur of red and white. The storm hadn't stopped, but now it felt different. It was no longer just them against it. Inside the vehicle, warmth surrounded them. The doors shut, blocking out most of the noise. The sudden quiet felt strange. His ears rang slightly from a change. A heater hummed softly, and another blanket was placed over her shoulders. He sat close enough that their knees touched. He didn't trust distance yet. One of the rescuers checked her pulse and breathing, asking if she felt dizzy, cold, or in pain. She answered slowly but clearly. He watched every movement, every blink, searching for signs that she was slipping away again. She looked at him at one point and gave the smallest nod. It was her way of saying she was still there. The drive to the nearest town felt long, even though it probably wasn't. Rain continued to fall, but the roads were clearer now. He stared out the window for a moment, watching the trees pass by. They looked calm again, almost innocent, as if they hadn't just been part of something terrifying. When they reached the small local clinic, bright lights and warm air welcomed them inside. Staff moved quickly but carefully. She was placed on a bed and covered with more blankets. Someone checked her temperature. Another asked questions about her health. He stood nearby, soaked clothes clinging to him, shoes squishing slightly with every step. A nurse handed him a towel and told him to sit down. He hadn't realized how tired he was until his legs almost gave out when he lowered himself into the chair. From across the room, she looked at him. Even in that moment, even with everything happening around her, she searched for his face. He stood up immediately and moved closer, so she wouldn't have to look far. "I'm here," he said quietly. She gave him a faint smile. "You stayed." He swallowed hard. "You asked me to." A doctor spoke to them gently, explaining that she was severely exhausted and very cold, but stable. They wanted to monitor her for a while, run a few basic tests, and make sure there were no deeper issues. Nothing sounded urgent, but it all sounded serious enough to remind him how close things had felt. When the staff stepped away for a moment, the room grew quiet again. The storm outside had softened into steady rain. No more thunder, no more violent wind, just the sound of water tapping against the windows. He pulled a chair closer to her bed and sat down. For a while, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The silence was different now. Not heavy, not afraid, just tired. After some time, she finally broke it. "I thought I was going to lose you out there," she said softly. He shook his head. "You weren't going to lose me." "I didn't mean like that," she replied. "I thought I was going to drift away, and you'd be left holding nothing." His chest tightened. He reached out and gently squeezed her hand. "You didn't drift," he said. "You held on." She looked at their hands. "I only held on because you wouldn't let me let go." He smiled faintly. "That's what best friends do." Tears filled her eyes, but they weren't from fear this time. They were from something else. Relief, gratitude, maybe even understanding. "I've been pretending for a long time," she admitted quietly. "Pretending I was strong enough to handle everything alone." "You don't have to," he said. "Not with me." She nodded slowly. "I know that now." The hours passed gently after that. The clinic staff checked on her regularly. He changed into dry clothes they provided, and finally felt warmth sink into his skin. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of rain, rising water, and her pale face in the shelter. He opened them quickly each time, needing to see her breathing steadily beside him. By early morning, the storm had fully passed. Pale sunlight filtered through the windows, soft and calm. It looked like an entirely different world outside. Streets were wet but quiet. Birds had started to return to the trees. The doctor came back with reassuring news. She would recover fully with rest. There were no major complications, but they strongly suggested she follow up on the symptoms she had mentioned earlier. Not later, not someday. Soon. She agreed without arguing. When they were finally cleared to leave, they stepped outside together. The air smelled fresh, washed clean by the storm. The sky was light blue with only thin clouds left behind, like reminders of what had happened. They stood there for a moment, not rushing to move. "It feels strange," she said, "like nothing happened." "But it did," he replied. She looked at him carefully. "Do you think it changed us?" He thought about it, about the fear in her eyes, about her whisper in the shelter, about how close everything had felt. "Yes," he said honestly, "I think it did." She nodded. "Me too." They didn't talk about it in dramatic ways. There were no big speeches, no sudden promises shouted into the sky, just quiet understanding. Over the next few weeks, she kept her word. She went to appointments. She asked for help when she felt tired instead of hiding it. It wasn't easy for her. He could see that, but she tried, and he stayed. Not because she asked again, but because he wanted to. Sometimes, late at night, when rain tapped lightly against the windows, she would send him a simple message, just 3 words, "Stay with me," and he would reply the same way every time. "I'm here." The storm that trapped them didn't just test their strength. It showed them something they had almost forgotten. That being strong doesn't mean standing alone. That sometimes survival is not about fighting the world, but about holding on to the person beside you. The memory of that night never fully left them. The sound of rain, the cold water, the shelter shaking in the wind. But it no longer felt like a nightmare. It felt like proof. Proof that in the darkest moment, when fear is loud and hope feels thin, a simple whisper can keep someone alive. And sometimes staying is the bravest thing you can do.